By dusk on October 24, 1944, the Japanese plan to trap the U.S. 7th Fleet inside Leyte Gulf appeared to be falling apart. Already, one major element of that plan, Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, had hit a snag. The previous day, Kurita's ships had been attacked by 2 American submarines while traversing Palawan Passage. USS Darter and USS Dace had fired a spread of torpedoes, sinking 2 Japanese cruisers and badly damaging a third. Throughout the day, U.S. carrier planes from Task Force 38 flew missions over the Sibuyan Sea, sinking the supposedly unsinkable super battleship Musashi and heavily damaging the cruiser Miyoko. As daylight faded, it appeared doubtful that Kurita would be able to keep to his schedule and pass through San Bernardino Strait before nightfall. However, Kurita's ships weren't the only Japanese vessels headed for a rendezvous at Leyte Gulf. Over 300 miles away, another Japanese task force was poised to make its attack. In the Sulu Sea, 2 Japanese surface groups, one commanded by Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura and another commanded by Vice Admiral Kiyohide Shima, were supposed to link up, enter Surigao Strait, and reach Leyte Gulf from the south. Between them, Nishimura and Shima possessed 13 ships, 2 battleships, 3 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, and 7 destroyers. The 2 admirals hoped they might achieve the surprise that Kurita had not. Unfortunately, Nishimura's and Shima's groups did not link up, not exactly. Due to a professional rivalry, both commanders refused to engage in radio communication with each other. They both kept to their schedules, but the 2 task groups never consolidated prior to their entry into the strait. They advanced independently, with Shima's group trailing Nishimura's by about 25 miles. More problematically, American pilots were searching for them from the skies above. At 6 a.m. on October 24th, Rear Admiral Ralph Davison's Task Group 38.4 launched 56 scout aircraft to cover the waters of the Sulu and Bohol Seas. Thanks to near-perfect visibility, the search teams found the enemy quickly. At 8 a.m. off the coast of Panay, scout planes from USS Franklin found 3 Japanese destroyers, a support group that planned to rendezvous with Shima's task force as they made their way south. Franklin's dive bombers attacked, sinking 1 destroyer, the Wakaba, and forcing the other 2 to retreat to Manila after rescuing Wakaba's survivors. Then at 8:30, another search team, this one led by Lieutenant Raymond Moore of USS Enterprise, sighted Nishimura's group in the waters southwest of Negros Island. Moore sent a radio message reporting 2 enemy battleships, a heavy cruiser, and 4 destroyers. Nearby, another search group under the direction of Commander Robert Riera heard Moore's report and decided to link up with him. Together, Riera's and Moore's combined group contained 16 F-6F Hellcats and 12 SB-2C Helldivers. Flying through a wall of anti-aircraft fire, including some of the new San Shakitan Beehive shells, USS Enterprise's planes dived on the 2 battleships, Fuso and Yamashiro, hitting them with their 500-pound bombs and their 5-inch wing-mounted rockets. 1 bomb exploded atop one of Fuso's 14-inch gun turrets, and Yamashiro developed a serious list when a bomb exploded atop its stern, igniting a depth charge and 2 float planes. However, neither battleship fell out of formation. After the crews doused the flames and leveled their ships, Fuso and Yamashiro proceeded onward as if nothing had happened. Low on fuel, USS Enterprise's aircraft beat a hasty retreat, minus 1 fighter plane that had been shot down. Although largely ineffective, this air attack gave the American admirals crucial time to prepare. Vice Admiral Thomas Kinkaid's 7th Fleet was nearby and available to engage enemy forces. At 2:45 p.m., Kinkaid sent a message to the commander of his battleship task group, Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf. Kinkaid advised, "Japs able to arrive at Leyte Gulf tonight. Make ready for night battle." Promptly, Oldendorf moved his surface ships from the western side of Leyte Gulf to the north end of Surigao Strait, deploying them inside the narrow channel between the southern Leyte Peninsula and Dinagat Island. 6 battleships, including 5 that had been involved in the 1941 air raid at Pearl Harbor, formed Oldendorf's main line, with 3 destroyers guarding each flank. 8 cruisers and 15 destroyers formed the next line. Additionally, 8 more destroyers were already in the strait when Oldendorf's task group arrived. These ships belonged to Desron 54, which had been on anti-submarine patrol since October 20th. Finally, Oldendorf dispatched 39 PT boats to the southern end of the strait to stage an ambush. 24 of them took up position east of Panay Island, and the other 15 took up positions in the Bohol Sea. By dusk, the chessboard was set. The American ships were in position, and the Japanese were steaming straight ahead. Battle was inevitable. The PT boats struck first. At 10:30 p.m., Nishimura's task group passed between Bohol and Camiguin Island, and there, the first wave of PTs charged in at high speed, launching their torpedoes. Over the next half hour, 12 PTs attacked the Japanese ships. They caused a nuisance, but inflicted no major damage. 1 PT boat was lost, and 9 others were damaged by shell fire. None of the American torpedoes hit their targets, but the confusing attack forced Nishimura's ships to fire star shells into the sky to illuminate the area for Japanese gunners. These bright explosions were seen by Oldendorf's sailors, who could now tell that the Japanese were on their way. 22-year-old Lieutenant James Holloway III served on a Fletcher-class destroyer, USS Bennion, which was assigned to the support line in front of the battleships. From his position at the Torpedo Director Optics Station, Holloway could see the commencement of the battle.
It was 25 October 1944, and I was standing up through the hatch in the ship's main director, scanning the horizon with my binoculars. The rumble of heavy gunfire had become continuous, and the lower quadrant of the southern sky reflected a steady glow from the gun muzzle flashes. The PT boats had sprung their ambush and triggered a fierce firefight. The Battle of Surigao Strait was underway. There was a tug on my trouser leg, and a sailor at the pointer station next to me motioned to my eyepiece. Looking through the magnification of the director optics, the scene to the south became much clearer. The crosshairs of the lens were fixed at the base of a jumbo pagoda of a Japanese battleship. The flashes from their main gun turret salvos and the rapid fire of their secondary battery were lighting up the entire ship. Her bow waves showed she was making at least 25 knots. I couldn't suppress a gasp, and I muttered, "It looks just like a picture of a Japanese battleship." The sailor next to me said, "Lieutenant, that is a Japanese battleship."
Having forced the PT boats to flee, Nishimura's ships steamed ahead, and at 2:44 a.m. on October 25th, they came within firing range of the American destroyers. 5 destroyers belonging to Captain Jesse Coward's Desron 54 attacked first. 3 of them approached Nishimura's line by coming a few points off the starboard bow of Nishimura's lead ship, while 2 others approached from the port bow. Nishimura's ships were in single file, 4 destroyers leading, then the Yamashiro, then the Fuso, and finally the heavy cruiser Mogami bringing up the rear. Japanese searchlights picked up the approaching tin cans, and their gunners began peppering the area with shell fire. According to plan, Desron 54's destroyers approached to within 8,000 yards and then began launching torpedoes. Between them, the 5 destroyers launched 47 fish. 7 of them struck their targets. 1 Japanese destroyer, the Yamagumo, blew up in a fiery inferno, having taken 2 direct hits to its torpedo magazine. It sank to the bottom in under 2 minutes. 2 other destroyers, Michisio and Asagumo, took hits that ripped enormous holes in their hulls. Although both ships managed to sail out of the strait, the crews had to abandon their ships shortly after daylight when an American destroyer arrived to finish them off. Finally, the battleship Fuso took 3 torpedo hits in quick succession, causing it to lose power and drop out of formation. Lightless and taking on water, Fuso drifted helplessly until around 4 a.m. when it suddenly capsized, taking nearly its entire contingent to a watery grave. After executing these attacks, Desron 54's ships peeled off to the east and west, laying smoke to obscure their retreat. Then, at 3:27, a second wave of American destroyers sailed into the fray. This was Desron 24, which consisted of 6 destroyers. They came down along the coastline of southern Leyte, and they fired a spread of torpedoes from the west side of Nishimura's line. At this point, only 3 of Nishimura's ships continued to advance: the battleship Yamashiro, the heavy cruiser Mogami, and the destroyer Shigure. Now the Yamashiro took heavy damage. One torpedo struck the battleship's port quarter, causing minor damage, while another struck at a depth of 22 feet, causing heavy flooding and dropping the battleship's speed to 5 knots. Delighted by the radio chatter from Desron's 54 and 24, Oldendorf ordered yet another torpedo attack. At 3:34, he sent a message to Captain Roland Smoot, the commander of Desron 56, telling him to take his ships forward and, quote, get the big boys. Smoot's 9 ships made haste, traveling in 3 columns, one down the east side of the strait, another down the west side, and the third down the middle. Smoot instructed each skipper to close to within 6,000 yards, fire 5 torpedoes, and then retreat under smoke. Lieutenant Holloway's vessel, USS Bennion, accompanied the western group. Bennion was last in a column of 3. Holloway recalled the moment his vessel began its run toward the enemy fleet.
The Bennion was now running in and out of rain squalls, and it was very dark. I could barely make out the other 2 destroyers in our 3-ship division. As the ship accelerated, almost simultaneously, the ship's general announcing system broadcast, "Starting run-in for the attack." I had been momentarily diverted, and when I again looked through the optics, I was startled to see how much larger the image of the Japanese battleship had grown. As our destroyers broke out of the shadow of the shoreline, we were immediately taken under fire by the Japanese battleships and cruisers. It was strange to be rushing through the dark, closing with the enemy at a relative speed of more than 50 knots, not firing our own guns, but receiving the steady gunfire of the Japanese ships. We were running through the explosions of the shots falling around us. The towering splashes of the incoming 14-inch and 8-inch shells were close enough to wet our weather decks. Both sides were also firing star shells, and their illumination added to the eerie aspect of the scene.
One by one, Desron 56's destroyers closed to the predetermined firing range and launched their torpedoes. Bennion's crew fired the squadron's last salvo. As gunnery officer, Lieutenant Holloway had the responsibility of determining when to pull the trigger.
When it was the Bennion's turn, the captain called out, "Launch torpedoes." The Japanese battleship completely filled the viewing glass of my optics. The crosshairs indicated that the torpedo aiming points were stabilized on the waterline just below the foremast. Glowing dials showed the torpedo tubes were trained clear and the torpedo gyros were set. I pushed the fire button on the torpedo control console and stood up to see our 5 fish shoot out of their tubes. I could hear them slap the water and knew they were running hot and straight. As Bennion retired to the north at 30 knots, the scene of action was one of growing confusion. The Japanese formation had disintegrated. Some of its ships were circling out of control. Others were dead in the water. Many were on fire, and they shuddered from massive internal explosions. Still others were unrecognizable, with bows gone, sterns blown away, and topsides mangled.
According to plan, USS Bennion veered away to the west, following behind USS H.L. Edwards and USS Leyte. As the destroyers made haste in the middle of the channel, tremendous shell splashes tossed geysers into the air. The American cruisers and battleships were now adding their big guns to the mix. Prior to the battle, Oldendorf had ordered his battleships and cruisers to pre-select a firing zone between 17,000 and 20,000 yards from the main line. At 3:51, as the Japanese ships steamed into it, this firing zone came alive with shell splashes. A salvo of 16-inch shells tore into the superstructure of Yamashiro, and a few minutes later, another shell exploded inside one of Yamashiro's amidships turrets. Farther behind, a salvo of 8-inch shells fired by an American cruiser slammed into the bridge of Mogami, killing its captain and XO. Sadly for the Americans, 20 cruiser rounds also slammed into a friendly destroyer, USS Albert Grant, which had not cleared the firing zone, killing 34 men. From the damaged bridge of Yamashiro, Admiral Nishimura ordered his flagship to come about. As Yamashiro turned west, then southwest, it cut across the path of USS Benyon. Lieutenant Holloway was still at his station, and he gasped when he saw the mammoth battleship careening toward his ship. He swung his director optics onto Yamashiro, which he quickly identified as an enemy vessel. The sailor at the rangefinder reported that Benyon's second salvo of torpedoes were locked on with fire control radar. Shouting to Benyon's skipper, Commander Joshua Cooper, Holloway asked for permission to fire the 5 remaining torpedoes at the deepest depth setting. Cooper relayed the command to his torpedo officer, and promptly the second torpedo mount swung to port. When the ships were side by side, only 3,000 yards apart, Holloway pushed the button. The torpedoes leaped into the water, and at 4:05, one of them made contact. It struck Yamashiro's starboard engine room, flooding it, while another last-minute torpedo, probably fired by USS Newcomb, struck Yamashiro's starboard beam. With 4 holes below the waterline, Yamashiro was listing badly and sinking fast. As it drifted south, Yamashiro managed to fire only a few shells in reply. Then the ship's engineers restored power to the engines. Suddenly, Yamashiro lurched forward at 12 knots, but this pushed unwanted water into its hull. The unexpected jolt in speed proved to be the battleship's undoing. At 4:19, Yamashiro suddenly capsized, taking 1,630 sailors with it, including Admiral Nishimura. U.S. forces managed to rescue only 3 survivors. 150 others were found alive and splashing in the water, but they refused to be rescued, and of those, only 10 managed to swim to shore. As Yamashiro went under, at 4:22, Rear Admiral Shima's task group arrived and added its weight to the battle. As Shima's flagship, the Nachi, closed the distance to the American fleet, it collided with one of Nishimura's ships, the badly damaged Mogami, which was trying to get out of the range of the American guns. Taking stock of the damage, Shima decided it was fruitless to continue the hellish march forward into the Americans' trap. He ordered the whole force to turn around and abandon the Surigao Strait operation. Only 6 of Shima's ships managed to get to safety. As the light cruiser Abukuma tried to come about, it was attacked by an American PT boat and lost. Only 2 of Nishimura's ships managed to escape, the Mogami and the Shigure. But even the crew of the Mogami had to abandon their ship later that morning, with one of Shima's ships scuttling it near Bohol Island. Altogether, the Japanese had lost 7 ships in Surigao Strait, and over 3,700 sailors killed. By contrast, the Americans had lost only 1 PT boat and fewer than 40 sailors killed. It had been a lopsided victory. At daylight on October 25th, the exhausted Americans went to work trying to pull survivors from the wrecks of the Japanese ships. Every member of Oldendorf's task group knew that the U.S. Navy had won a decisive victory. Although the Japanese stood little chance at breaking through the American line, the U.S. Navy had triumphed because of the near-flawless cooperation of every ship in Oldendorf's group. From the smallest PT boat to the largest battle wagon, every ship had a role to play. By working together, 7th Fleet had achieved the type of victory that every sailor dreamed about, a crushing victory with minimal losses.